So I wanted to put something together really just to show new clients and existing clients a little bit about ethical investments, what they do, if they work, and the different terms within the ethical investment sphere, just to kind of debunk jargon. So when you invest money, your money is temporarily used by someone else, such as a company or a government, primarily to fund their activities. But what if some of these activities clash with your personal values or those of your own business? For instance, if you had a relative who gambled the family jewels and inheritance away, you probably wouldn't want anything to do with gambling in the investment choices you make. Or a particular organisation may find itself embarrassed by the investment choices that have been made. For example, a terminal disease charity having funds in carcinogenic practices such as tobacco. That's not in good taste and would, I'm sure, lose that charity a lot of money if people became aware of it. So generally speaking, when you invest, it's very difficult to tell where the funds are coming from and what they are funding. But you have a bit better chance, a bit more of a chance of being able to tell if you invest in ethical funds. So, I've gone back to, but that's okay. What's an ethical investment? The term ethical investing, in my opinion, covers a very wide range of types of investment. And overall, it just means that as well as growing your money to beat inflation and receive good returns, hopefully, you also want your money to be used for good. Who wouldn't? If those returns were as good as those that traditional investments gave. For example, one ethical investor might simply aim to avoid putting their money in industries known to cause harm, such as tobacco, armaments, or gambling. A more rigorous ethical investor may look to invest in companies with particularly high standards with regard to the environment, society, and how they're run. These standards are known as environmental, social, and governance criteria, and are often used by socially conscious investors to screen their investments. Traditional investments are not bad investments just because ethical ones invest in good. It just means that sometimes those traditional investments may not fit in with the investment's ethics, investors' ethics or ethos, and that ethical investment is preferred because of that. So what is ESG investing? ESG stands for environmental, social, and corporate governance. These are generally thought to be the three main factors when looking at sustainability and impact of a business or another organisation. Environmental factors look at the organisation's carbon footprint, its contribution to other forms of pollution, its sustainability or renewability, and other impacts it may have on the environment. Ethical investors typically look for activities in these businesses that offset these effects. Social factors include the diversity of the business workforce, how inclusive it behaves, how it actually fulfills its responsibilities towards its consumers, and its working policies relating to them. Corporate governance is directly shown through how a company is run, its overall structure, and the way in which all employees are treated, especially comparing the management to the actual worker bees within the company. So is the treatment of everyone standardized and fair? Are there different strengths of ethical? How strict do you want to be? If you're content to just avoid certain types of industries or business practices, then socially responsible investing, or SRI, may be enough for you. SRI funds set broad criteria when constructing a portfolio to screen out less ethical companies. However, SRI funds tend to focus on best-in-class companies, rather avoiding whole industries, so may include, for instance, oil companies that show more responsibility than their competitors. Such funds are sometimes described as light green. If you want to go a little stricter, then you may want to look at fully ethical funds. These will handpick companies to invest in based on the strong ESG criteria, and will exclude any that don't meet its standards. Such funds may be described as dark or medium green. Another kind of fund is a passively ethical investment fund. A passively ethical investment fund invests in a range of ordinary companies, regardless of their ethical slant, and then uses its position as a significant shareholder to try and improve any ethical concerns by voting on resolutions. This may or may not have an effect on greening up the companies involved. So, does it really work? So there's an awful lot of evidence to suggest that so far it really is working, because there are two benefits here: returns and good. There may be times when so-called ethical investors may have to trade their beliefs against making a return and make a call on it. However, there does seem to be evidence to show that this may not have to be the case. Before ethical investments were even a thing in 2008, the financial crisis revealed that Islamic banks that held Sharia-compliant funds avoided most of the losses in the banking industry at that time. A successful ESG fund will generally target companies that are profitable first and only then consider their ESG credentials, rather than just investing in anything with a good corporate responsibility. So this will give you another edge. Why is ESG investing so important? Well, there's no point having a huge investment pot if at that point the planet's no longer a pleasant place to live. ESG investing really looks at the whole picture, getting you to the point where you have both money and a healthy world in which to spend it. That's a little bit cheesy, but it's true. There's also something to think about here. This quote from Richard Curtis, the comedy writer, stuck in my mind for never underestimating the effect that goodness your money can do in terms of planet saving. Moving your savings to sustainable funds can be 27 times as effective at reducing your carbon footprint than eating less meat, using public transport, reducing water use, and flying less combined. Richard Curtis has become somewhat of an expert in this field since launching a campaign that aims to help move some of the 3 trillion in UK pensions out of industries that are harming people and the planet and into sustainable businesses. So how can my IFA help? So choose independent, not restricted financial advisors. They are unbiased, unrestricted when looking at financial products, and can source from the whole of the marketplace. This means choice, it also means economy, it also means bespoke. And secondly, an IFA will be experienced in identifying funds, if that's what they do, and comparing them objectively. Quite simply, they know what to look for and what qualities and or risks to be aware of. They won't inevitably make the right call every time, but the odds of them picking good funds, again, if that's what they do, are very much better than the odds of anyone doing it by chance or after a few hours of online research. Thirdly, it's much simpler and easier to use an IFA. You simply talk to them about your investment needs and your ethical preferences, and the IFA will go away and find suitable funds or model portfolios for you to choose from. The difference in returns between good and poor funds can be dramatic, which in many cases will more than justify the IFA's fee. And so there are other benefits over and above all the good stuff we've spoken about regarding this type of investment. Many of these green industries linked to growth, ethical investments get government subsidies, and with this comes natural growth, giving better returns long term, especially within the sustainability arena. Sustainability equals long term, and long term is at the core of good investing. Competent governance of good companies also means stability, and this means less of the ups and downs that we experience every day in the investment world, which we call volatility. This type of investing is becoming more and more popular, especially amongst the younger clients I have, and in my opinion, will become a core way to invest in the very near future. And that's your lot.
Great stuff. That was really, really good, Fiona. So, a couple of questions from me. If you can stop sharing your screen, that would be amazing. So, a couple of questions. It was really good. Thank you. A couple of questions from me to kick us off with. As you know, so firstly, a thank you, because I know that we've spoken about my Cervelo for Good proposition that hopefully we're going to be launching within the next 3 weeks. So your support
Fingers
on that's
crossed.
been really good. But interestingly, that was driven by demand from a couple of our clients saying, actually, we are focusing more on our money doing good. And Chris, you talk about do well, do good as part of the Cervelo values. How are you living up to those principles? And that's never happened before. So I suppose question one is you've talked about that increase in popularity. Do you think that's a trend due to continue? And then number two is, and I know I'm being a bit cheeky here because we both know independent advice is best, but why do you think independence when you get advice is so important?
Well, the first question is, yeah, it's a trend that's going to go upwards inevitably. I think the more and more young people who start looking, number one, at their retirement pots and their, investment ISAs, they're going to want to look at, making their money grow in a good way. They are leading the way, really, in the way that they do little things, really. I think much more than we ever did. Kind of not lumping you in with my generation, Chris, because I know you're younger than me. But
I'm just, if we're talking about, I'm just in that one down, Fiona. It's not far.
Well, I think for me, younger people were brought up in it. They were brought up in the greenness. At school, they were taught about sustainability and the importance of, helping the planet. We never had things like that. It was like, chuck your tinny in the bin, mate. That's what it was all about. And
you know what? I think the other interesting change is that us moving to an age where values are fundamentally more important as part of the conversation in every aspect of our life.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of the whole of market question, it's a no-brainer. When looking for ethical funds, it's a no-brainer to use an independent financial advisor, because they've got that ability to look far and wide for you to get the best possible ethical, whether it be model portfolio, which is a kind of bagged up set of funds that are already kind of done for you, or picking funds. I'm not a picker. It's not my skill set, and I personally feel like financial advisors who pick funds, it's not the way to go for me. I think you're setting yourself up for a bit of trouble. So I use model portfolios. I use a range of different ethical model portfolios, ranging from light green to the darkest green, kind of Extinction Rebellion type dark green. So yes, is the word whole of market is much better.
Amazing. Any questions for Fiona? Terry?
Are there any investment companies that have been set up purely as an ethical investment company, or is it just ethical funds within existing investment companies?
I'm sure there are specific. Oh, I can't get my words out. I'm so tired. Specific companies that have been set up in terms of just providing ethical funds. But a lot of the bigger companies in the financial services industry are set up for ethical funds now. I personally use a platform that provides model portfolios for a different range of ethical funds, and those model portfolios contain lots of different companies worth of ethical funds. So your question, I don't know whether I've answered it, Terry, but I'm sure there are. Don't know the answer.
Yeah, they're because I've been knee deep in the research over the last 3 weeks. There is,
Yeah.
but as Fiona said, they're not necessarily, just because they've been set up just to offer those funds, they might not necessarily be the best solution. Sorry, Fiona, I just jumped in on that.
No,
just
all right.
Because you've helped me so much, I'm knee deep in this sort of stuff at the minute.
No, it's good.
Anybody else got any questions? Ian.
Fiona, I'm probably one of the people who is really keen on looking at green anything, green investments, green technology and transport, anything like that. But is there a trade-off between, as we're looking at financial security, is there a trade-off between choosing green to retain better portfolio growth or even more income later down the line if you chose more traditional methods?
I actually don't think there is, no. I think ethical funds are performing better, if not better than traditional funds at the moment. And whether that's to do with the pandemic, I really don't know. But I think, we've all kind of become aware of our environment. We're using less resources overall. And I think because of that, I think ethical funds have done really well over the last year. A lot of growth in there. And people are actively choosing them as opposed to traditional funds. And they're not more expensive. They used to be a little bit more expensive because they're actively managed, most of them. But the price annually is comparative now, I'm finding, with some of the other traditional funds. What do you think, Chris, on that?
Who knows, because nobody's got a crystal ball. But there's an argument to suggest that if you've got companies who are doing good to the environment, good socially, but most importantly, govern well, like managed firms that are managed well, which the governance element focuses on, longer term, you'd expect those companies to outperform. The challenge that we always had at Savello, and the reason we haven't done it before, is there was too much of a cost difference between buying green funds and not, and that gap's closed massively. So effectively it's a different landscape now, and one where it's an interesting one, Ian, because our job is to make sure that our clients achieve their financial goals, right? Step one. And step two, what's the best route to do that? And I think the debate about whether to do that for good or to do that in a core portfolio is now a lot slimmer. Still a difference, but now a lot slimmer. So, I like this double act, Fiona. This is good fun. Any other questions that I'm just going to get Fiona to answer because it's not my presentation? Any other questions?
No more questions.
Great stuff. Thank you, Fiona. That was really, really good.
My pleasure.
And I really appreciate you doing that.